The morning air was sharp with the scent of pine and cold earth. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees like golden threads weaving through the mist. In that lonely forest, far from any settlement, a small boy wandered, barefoot, hungry and lost. His name was Caleb, a little orphan no older than 10, with dirt-streaked cheeks and a heart that had already known too much pain. The world had turned its back on him months ago when sickness took his parents, and fire consumed their cabin. Since then, Caleb had lived off wild berries and rainwater, sleeping beneath trees and whispering to the stars for comfort. That morning he followed the sound of crows and the faint crackle of something moving through the brush. When he stepped closer, he froze. There, half hidden among ferns and fallen branches, lay a man, not a settler, not someone from the nearby town, but a native warrior. His body was bloodied, his chest rising shallowly. One arrow was broken in his side, and his hand clutched the earth as if he were holding on to life itself. Caleb's heart pounded. He had heard the stories, the whispers that said these warriors were dangerous, that they took no mercy on intruders. But looking at this man now, gasping for breath, he saw not an enemy but a human being fighting to survive. The boy dropped to his knees beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes flickered open, dark and clouded with pain. His voice came weakly in broken English. "Water, please." Caleb looked around frantically, then ran to the nearby stream, filling his small tin cup and returning as fast as his trembling hands allowed. The warrior drank, his eyes never leaving the boy's face. "You not run away?" he asked. Caleb shook his head. "You're hurt. I can help." He didn't know much about medicine, but he remembered how his mother used to clean wounds. Tearing a strip from his shirt, he pressed it against the bleeding side and held it there. The man winced but did not push him away. Hours passed as Caleb gathered herbs, fetched more water, and kept watch for danger. Each time the man drifted into pain or silence, Caleb whispered softly, "You'll be okay, I promise." When night fell, the forest grew cold. The boy built a small fire beside the wounded man, using dry twigs and moss. He wrapped his own thin blanket around him, ignoring the chill biting his skin. The warrior looked at him, confusion mixing with gratitude. "Why help me?" he murmured. Caleb hesitated, staring into the fire. "Because once someone helped me, before they were gone." His voice cracked, and the warrior said nothing. But a single tear glistened in his eye before it vanished in the flicker of the flame. The night was long, filled with the sounds of wolves in the distance. Caleb didn't sleep. He stayed awake, feeding the fire, whispering stories to keep the man from fading into the darkness. At dawn, the forest awoke with the songs of birds, and Caleb finally let himself breathe. The man's color had returned slightly, his wound no longer bleeding as badly. "You strong boy," the warrior said weakly. "Name?" Caleb smiled faintly. "Caleb, what's yours?" The man paused. "Tasunka," he said. "It means horse." He closed his eyes and whispered, "My people. They come. Maybe today." Caleb didn't know whether to be relieved or afraid. But before he could ask more, the sound of distant hoofbeats thundered through the forest. The boy turned. Emerging from the trees were shadows, not one, not 10, but dozens. Warriors on horseback, painted and armed, their faces solemn and fierce. Caleb's heart seized in his chest. He backed away from Tasunki instinctively, fear taking hold. The warriors dismounted swiftly, surrounding the boy and the wounded elder. One of them shouted something in their native tongue. Pointing toward Caleb, Tasunki raised his weak hand and said hoarsely, "No, help me. This child saved my life." The warriors froze. Their leader, a tall man with eagle feathers woven into his hair, stepped forward and knelt beside Caleb. His sharp eyes studied the boy, then turned toward the wound. After a moment he said something softly, and the warriors lowered their weapons. Caleb trembled, not understanding. The leader looked at him again and spoke slowly. "You helped our elder. When others would run, you are brave." Caleb swallowed hard, unable to speak. The leader stood, calling to his men. In one swift motion, 2 riders lifted Tasunki gently onto a horse. while another placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You come," he said simply. Caleb hesitated but felt something in their tone, not anger, but respect. As they rode toward the rising sun, the boy looked back at the river and the small fire still burning beside it. He didn't know where they were taking him or what awaited him, but deep in his heart he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of home. The ride through the forest was long and silent. Caleb sat behind one of the younger warriors, clinging tightly as the horses moved swiftly over roots and fallen branches. The morning light broke through the canopy, scattering gold across the riders. He could still hear Tasunke groaning softly on the horse ahead, held steady by two men, fear and confusion tangled inside the boy's chest. He didn't know if he was being taken to safety or to judgment. The rhythm of the hooves echoed in his ears like the beating of his own heart. After what felt like hours, the forest opened into a vast clearing, a hidden valley alive with movement. Smoke rose from many fires, children played near streams, and rows of hide tents shimmered in the sunlight. It was a great village pulsing with life. At least 200 warriors stood guard along its borders, their presence both powerful and peaceful. Caleb had never seen anything like it. Every head turned as the group entered, whispers rippling through. The camp at the sight of a pale, ragged boy among their own. They stopped at the largest tent in the center. The chief, a man of deep wisdom and quiet strength, emerged. His long braids were streaked with silver, his gaze calm but piercing. He looked first at Tasunke, who had been carried down from the horse, then at Caleb. "Tell me," he said in English that was slow but clear, "how did this boy come to be here?" Tasunke struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on one of the warriors. "He found me, wounded," he said. "He stayed, gave me water, fire, his own blanket. Without him, I would be gone." The crowd murmured in surprise. The chief stepped forward, studying Caleb's small face, the dirt on his skin, the torn clothes hanging from his shoulders. "You are alone?" he asked. Caleb nodded, his eyes downcast. "My family's gone, sir. The sickness took them. I've been wandering ever since." The chief's eyes softened. "And you still chose to help a man you were told to fear?" Caleb looked up then, his voice trembling. He was hurt. "I couldn't just leave him." A long silence followed. The chief turned to his people and spoke in his native tongue. The words flowed like the wind through leaves, and one by one, the faces around Caleb changed, suspicion melting into admiration. The chief lifted his hand for silence. Then he looked at the boy again and said, "In our way, we believe that spirits watch the hearts of men. When they see true kindness, they guide it back in greater form." He pointed toward the crowd of warriors. "This boy saved one of us. Today, all 200 of us will become his family." Caleb blinked, unsure he'd heard right. The warriors began to chant softly, their voices rising like the sound of the river itself. The chief walked to the boy, placed a beaded necklace around his neck, and said, "From this day you are Tasunke Ota, the little brother of the horse clan." Tears filled Caleb's eyes as the people surrounded him, men placing their hands on his shoulders, women bringing food and blankets, children laughing and running to touch him. For the first time since his parents' death, he felt safe. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't lost. Days turned into weeks. Caleb learned to ride horses, to track animals, to craft arrows and tend fires. The tribe taught him not just survival, but belonging. Tasunke recovered and often sat with him by the river, teaching him words from their language and stories of their ancestors. "You see," Tasunke would say, "when you saved me, you didn't just cross a river, you crossed between two worlds." One evening, under a sky burning with stars, the chief called for a feast in Caleb's honor. Drums echoed through the valley as fires roared high. Warriors painted in red and black danced around the flames, celebrating unity and life. When the noise quieted, the chief raised his hand and said, "This boy taught us that even those from far lands carry the same light inside. He came to us with nothing, but gave us something priceless, a reminder that kindness is stronger than fear." Caleb felt his heart swell as the people cheered. He looked around, faces glowing in the firelight, eyes filled with warmth, and knew he would never be alone again. As the fire crackled and the drums faded into the night, Caleb looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Mom and Dad. I finally found my home." Then, turning toward the camera, his voice filled with quiet strength, he said, "Sometimes one act of kindness can change your entire life. It can turn strangers into family and fear into love." If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and join us, because the world still needs stories like this. Stories that remind us that humanity still shines brightest in the darkest woods. The screen faded to black, the echo of drums lingering like a heartbeat.